Greetings, adventurers, and welcome back to the Den of the Drake. Other dragons hoard gold, while I hoard internet cringe. As a Chad RPG enthusiast, I tend to get thrown onto the DM side of the screen more often than not. So I know a thing or two about what goes into being an effective dungeon master. And let me tell ya, it's a lot of work. Let me lay out an analogous hypothetical that will illustrate what it's like to be a DM. You are a baker. You're a damn good baker, and you're able to bake cakes like Moist Critical dodges haircuts. One day, a group of 4 to 8 bonobos walk into your bakery and ask you to make the best cake that you can. So out of the goodness of your heart, you bake these apes the best banana cream layer cake that God's green earth has ever seen. Only to watch them smear that shit all over their faces and hands before writing Critical Role did it better on your windows using their own feces. And then 2 days later, you see that they left you a 1-star Yelp review because you baked them a banana cake instead of a strawberry one. This is life as a DM. Of course I'm exaggerating, but if your only exposure to the role of the Dungeon Master was through my videos and the RPG Horror Stories subreddit, you would think that DMs are these extraplanar beings capable of bending the fabric of the universe, and they always have to share some responsibility if something goes catastrophically wrong, which is far from the case. Today I have 2 stories for you to enjoy about 2 very unfortunate DMs who have to stare down their own groups of bonobos who are hell-bent on taking everything good and throwing their shit at it. Now without any further delay, let's go ahead and dive right into the horrifying world of r/RPG horror stories. Enjoy. Story number 1 is titled, It's What Jester Would Do. A group of players that watch too much Critical Role. This is a story about a short-lived campaign I ran like last year for a friend of mine that I will name Sasha and her friends. They were super interested in playing a D&D game, but they had never actually played a game of D&D, and I had some time at that point, so I offered to run a D&D game for them. I worked and created this fantasy world based around the central theocratic kingdom that initially appeared to be a calming force on the continent, but in actuality were evil and were causing problems all over the land and stoking xenophobia to justify becoming a militant isolationist country. When talking to the party, they almost immediately started talking about how much they love to watch Critical Role, and I was like, oh, cool, I guess. I've never been particularly interested in Critical Role. I've seen some clips on YouTube and watched an episode where they hunted some frog demon in a circus, but it never really grabbed me. Personally, I'm more of a Dimension 20 guy, but that's not important. I didn't really think anything of that, which was a big mistake. Almost any time any of them did anything, they would go on a 20-minute tangent about how something slightly related to Critical Role. There were even a few times where they'd be like, oh, this is like the time in Critical Role when they did this. Are you sure you didn't watch Critical Role? No, I don't watch Critical Role. They didn't invent all fantasy world storylines. There were even a few instances where players would go and do something and be like, okay, so did you watch that episode of Critical Role where they did this? And I'd respond with, no. And they'd respond with, ugh, lame. And once, one of the players even went, God, this is annoying. You should watch Critical Role. We're trying to have fun here. Apparently, my not watching Critical Role is inhibiting their fun. Somehow. Sasha was the worst offender of this during character creation. Sasha began with, okay, so do you know the character Jester from Critical Role? I responded with, kinda. Sasha then goes into detail about how she really likes Jester's personality and how she thinks that the voice Laura Bailey does is funny, and essentially Sasha's character is just Jester to a T. Literally even down to being a tiefling that is half Genasi. The only difference was that Sasha's character was half fire Genasi instead. I mostly just brushed it off because in my experience, new players would often rely on existing characters to base their first characters off of. This was a mistake. Sasha would always talk in a poor recreation of Jester's voice. But unfortunately, Sasha is not a professional voice actress, so it was not a particularly good performance, and just sounded like a really bad Russian accent. If that was it, I wouldn't have had an issue. I suck at voices too. Almost everything she said or did had the tagline of,
"This is what Jester would do, so this is what I do."
She mostly used this to justify acting as an airheaded, flighty character that was the definition of chaotic random. Now, I'm not super familiar with the characters in the Critical Role campaign, so someone will need to tell me if this is something that Jester would do. The party was in the governor's mansion of the town they were in, and they were getting a job to do something about the nightmares plaguing the town. I wrote the governor as this small, worried little man who is a touch incompetent, and when negotiating with the governor, Sasha got annoyed that the negotiations weren't going anywhere. So she says that she wants to,
grab the jewels of the governor and twist until he gives in and gives them the pay that they want.
I immediately tell her no, because one of the few rules I have at my table, one I mentioned at the beginning of our talks to run this game, is no sexual violence of any kind. Sasha rolls her eyes and says that it didn't really matter since
he's a guy.
I just remained firm and repeated of any kind. She just goes,
"Ugh, fine, whatever."
This happened a lot. She was also a very impatient role player, but also tried to turn every interaction into a personal acting performance, since
it's what they do on Critical Role.
It was a dichotomy that did not work. She would rebound between dragging things out into a slog when all they had to do was talk to a priest about what he thinks is causing the nightmares. It was kind of a dream eater monster, by the way. Causing what should have been maybe a 5-minute conversation to become a 40-minute gallivant that resulted in nothing really happening and ignoring major NPCs and information because she didn't have the patience to talk to the court wizard for more than 7 seconds. The game fizzled out after a few sessions because I had had enough of them basically trying to turn the campaign into some kind of Critical Role fan game. Much to their surprise and chagrin, not everyone watches Critical Role. TLDR. A group of new players that are really into Critical Role play in a new campaign and try to make everything about Critical Role and get annoyed at me, the DM, because I don't watch Critical Role. One player just wants to be Jester in every aspect. End of story. Oh boy, Critical Role and its consequences have been a disaster for the RPG space. Look, I know what I'm about to say is the equivalent of playing hopscotch on a landmine, and no one try to stop me, but I just want to say that I'm not the biggest fan of Critical Role these days. I don't hate that it exists like I do with other pieces of media, but it's just not something that I find myself having much interest in anymore, and it's totally okay if you do. For me, I lost interest because it evolved from a group of friends playing D&D who just so happened to be famous voice actors, into a group of famous voice actors who just so happened to be playing D&D. I'm not huge on celebrity culture in any regard, so I kinda planned my exit around the beginning of when they started playing live sessions because I found it really annoying when the entire audience would start clapping like seals every time Sam rolled anything above a 13. And the saddest part is that most of the cast doesn't have that, "oh, look at me" attitude that I find so grating. That shift away from the game itself to who was playing the game isn't the fault of the cast entirely, but the fault of Critical Role stands like the people we see in this story. Look, it's no secret that Critical Role stands are fucking psychotic, which you can plainly see in this story because of the whole
"it's okay because he is a guy"
thing. Truth be told, I fully expect a few of them to be foaming at the mouth in the comments section because I dared to go after their golden calf here. Look, it's been said time and time again, but comparing your home game to Critical Role isn't gonna do anything but make everyone disappointed. Every table has a different vibe, and Critical Role just so happens to be a vibe powered by a tiny company called Amazon, but that's neither here nor there. If you try and make your table's energy match that of a streamer's table, you are only succeeding in making a worse version of what already exists. Why deny yourself the opportunity to create your own little special something? Sure, you might really enjoy the way Matt DMs, or you like Laura Bailey's voices, or you might laugh at Sam's goofy characters, or publicly admit that you formed a parasocial relationship with Travis Willingham and Joe Manganiello, wishing that they would become a pair of adopted fathers that could replace the one you never had. I mean, what? Okay, ignore that. I just want to make it clear that I appreciate what Critical Role has done for the hobby. For those who don't know, I'm a powerlifter / weightlifting enthusiast outside of the whole cartoon dragon thing. And I always had to keep that sort of thing hush-hush around my D&D friends who were predominantly from a musical theater background. So you can imagine that something like Jox Machina played a huge role in why someone like me felt comfortable enough to join a hobby predominantly occupied by a type of person who would prefer to ostracize someone like me. But regardless of how it made me feel in the past, you still gotta acknowledge that it has some flaws. I mean, if you pretend that something you love is flawless, all you're really doing is killing the roots of something new that might become something beautiful. Anyways, enough pretentious rambling, we got one more story to cover. Story number 2 comes from Reddit user Asterion Del Toro, and is titled, DM Gets Blamed Because Bandits Act Like Intelligent Human Beings. After 1 or 2 adventures together, the party was contracted by the town guard to deal with some bandits, who had been ambushing travelers to and from the boonies. Walking along the road, they run into a camp of ne'er-do-wells. Rough-looking guys, the DM says, set up in tents walking alongside the road. As the party approaches, the ruffians laugh at what was apparently a dirty joke. The party's face hails the men, who get quiet all of a sudden. After some small talk, the face tells them that he and his fellows are looking for bandits troubling the road. One of the toughs, a gruff man with only one good eye, replies, "You don't say." Tension hangs in the air. "Yes," says the face. "Would you happen to know anything about that?" "What are you implying?" One Eye answers. "Well," the face says, "if you've been camped out here for a while, you've probably seen something, or maybe heard from some people who are attacked." The DM isn't sure where this is going. Face is being very friendly, and none of the players seem to be expecting a fight. DM asks for a perception check. Everyone passes, and the DM tells him that these men look like real rough customers. Most of them have scars, all of them are wearing patchy leather armor, all of them are armed with worn but lethal-looking weapons, whom they also all have their hands on. Most of them have recent cuts and superficial wounds, and all of them are keeping their eyes on the party. The face smiles, understanding what the DM's getting at, or so he thinks. "In fact, from the look of it, you seem to have had some trouble recently. Maybe a scuffle with the same bandits?" One Eye stares, saying nothing but looking a little confused. "Well, since you're not dead, you obviously managed to drive them off, yes?" Face continues. "Did you happen to see where they fled?" Another party member cuts in. "If you help us find their hideout, we'll gladly give you a share of the reward." One Eye tells the party to hold on a second, and then confers with his men out of the party's earshot. After a minute or so, One Eye comes back. "Yeah, we tussled with him," he says. "In fact, we know exactly where they're holed up. They're too tough for us, but you look like you wouldn't have much trouble. Come on, we'll show you." A quick hike takes the party and their new comrades into the woods, to a cave on a hillside. A short distance inside the cave, they come to a rope bridge stretched across a chasm. One Eye tells the party to go first. There's trouble on the opposite side. The party does so. "Are the bandits close?" the face asks. "Oh, they're very close," One Eye says. "In fact, they're right behind you." The bandits suddenly cut the ropes, collapsing the bridge and sending the party tumbling into the chasm. All while One Eye and his crew laugh. The players immediately call shenanigans on the DM. "What the hell?" the face says. "Why are they betraying us for the bandits?" "Those were the bandits," the DM says. "Bullshit," says another player. "If they were bandits, they would have attacked us on sight. You're just making shit up to punish us." "Why would they have attacked you?" asks the DM. "They're bandits," the player replies. "It's what they do. They attack people on roads and they take their stuff." Another player cuts in. Yeah, it's a dick move, man. It feels like you just decided that they were bandits on a whim. Everybody is glaring at the DM, and everybody is pissed. Look, bandits are like predators, the DM says. They don't attack the strongest prey, but the weakest. The people who travel this road are small peddlers and farmers. You are mercenaries with armor, weapons, and magic. They're not gonna pick a fight with you if they can avoid it. Fuck off, you're just a shite DM. How are you supposed to fight them if they won't attack first? You could have attacked first, the DM says. You're working with the town guard, and they're obviously... All the more reason that they would attack us, a player cuts in. The DM looks around in disbelief. He seems to be the only one at the table who finds it plausible for professional criminals to assess risks and exercise discretion. DM quickly moves on with the party, landing at the bottom of the pit, forgetting about fall damage to mollify them, which segues into a dungeon crawl to get back to the surface. In the end, the players consider it a satisfying session, but to this day, they consider this incident to be a huge gaffe on the DM's part. They can't comprehend that a bandit could be anything other than an automaton who sees adventurers and flies into a homicidal rage to shake down a heavily armored party for a few coins to buy dinner. Heaven forbid that the NPCs be at least as intelligent as the players. TLDR. Party fails to recognize obvious bandits because they don't attack immediately. Get led into a trap, then blame the DM for making the bandits behave like they can actually think. End of story. What a bunch of babies. The expectation that hostile NPCs don't just launch into a full sprint while shouting, "Never should have come here," says a lot about the kind of game that these guys were going for. It's actually pretty funny since this is the exact opposite of the last story. Look, I've said this a million times, but D&D is not a video game. And it really needs to be clearly communicated that people are gonna be acting like people and not lines of code. If you're an 8-foot-tall half-giant with an axe coated in the blood of demons and armor made of dragon hide, the bandit with pencil wrists is not gonna shank you with the fantasy equivalent of a popsicle stick to steal your lunch money. Now, I will say that if the DM ended up killing some characters, that would be a dick move. Allow players to make mistakes and suffer the consequences of those mistakes, but it's never fun for something to instantly turn lethal. In these scenarios, it's a good idea as a DM to channel the humble rattlesnake. Keep giving the offending party loud and repeated warnings, maybe even a few dry bites with no venom at all. But after all of that, they still insist on doing what they're doing? Well, that just means it's time to inject a not-so-healthy mixture of hemo and neurotoxins right into their face. That's why rattlesnakes are the Chad of the snake world. They really don't want to bite you, and they're gonna make it really obvious that they don't want to bite you. But they absolutely will. But it sounds to me like the DM was going for more of a Patches the Hyena sort of exchange here, where the party gets kicked into a hole and now they gotta crawl their way out in order to confront the kicker themselves. There's literally a whole-ass book on how to play monsters effectively, but in a way that's still fun for everyone called The Monsters Know What They're Doing. It really makes you wonder why there wasn't a book ever titled The Players Know What They're Doing. Maybe it's because they really don't. And on that note, let's take a look at this week's Gallery of the Drake. This week's fan art comes from viewer Leakin' and depicts a discussion that I've seen at least 14 billion times in my comment section. Okay, I think it's time that I finally address this. Firstly, if I named the channel Den of the Dragon, it would have gotten overshadowed by the shittier version of the American show Shark Tank, and I'll be damned if my channel gets associated with anything British. And second, J.R.R. Tolkien, the father of all modern fantasy, refers to Smaug, the most famous dragon in all of pop culture, as a fire drake. And if you're gonna tell motherfucking Tolkien that he's wrong because you saw some bullshit Tumblr post, then you got some other issues going on. You're not a drake. And you're a dragon. So what, fiend? So you're wrong. Oh? And who gets to decide what a drake is? You or someone else's subjective sources that change from fabricated universe to fabricated universe. I didn't realize that dragons, despite being fictional creatures, are now subject to human laws of taxonomy. Do tell me what class, order, family, genus, and species a dragon and a drake would fall under in their respective branches on the tree of evolution. What selective pressures led natural selection to create an animal that can breathe fire? Are dragons and drakes even related, or are they a product of convergent evolution? It's a fun thought experiment, but without proper grounding in real genetic lineages, it's ridiculous to hold all media featuring dragons to the same subjective standard. Your argument holds less water than someone else correcting me for calling myself a drake despite looking nothing like a male duck, which of course is ridiculous but is still a creature grounded in our own reality. What do you have to say to that, demon?
Demon? I am a devil!
Thank you again, Leakin' Pen, for submitting your art. If you'd like to see your fan art featured in Gallery of the Drake, be sure to send it to the email in my About section, along with anything you'd like me to promote in my description. Fan art is my favorite part of doing YouTube, and it means the world to me that I can inspire artists like you to create artwork like this. With the story over and artwork displayed, we're gonna go ahead and wrap up. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And if you feel like supporting the channel further, my Patreon and merchandise links are in the description. I would like to thank you all for listening, and I hope to see you next time in the Den of the Drake.